Thank you, Chairman Menendez, Ranking Member Risch, and all the esteemed members of the committee. Thank you all for turning out today. After this hearing, I am going to be flying to the Horn of Africa, which is the epicenter of the unprecedented global food crisis that we face today. The crisis has many sources, as we know, record droughts and heat waves that are destroying crops and livelihoods, economic shocks from COVID-19 that have shuttered markets, fed inflation, and erased the fiscal space that many countries had to deal with emergencies. And, of course, Vladimir Putin's vicious assault on Ukraine and his ongoing, devastating use of food as a weapon of war. Putin's blockade of Ukrainian ports and his forces' bombardment of farmland and storage facilities holding nearly 20 million tons of grain and maize hostage has sent what were already record food prices even higher. And the Russian Federation and the People's Republic of China also restricted the export of fertilizer, actions that have led in many countries to a tripling of fertilizer prices, threatening not just today's harvests, but next year's as well. But since this crisis emerged, the United States, thanks in large part to the urgency and generosity shown by members of Congress on both sides of the aisle, is leading the world in a global response. Our fight against the global food security crisis has three main fronts: rapidly distributing emergency humanitarian aid, making sustained investments in agricultural productivity, and concerted diplomacy of the kind Ambassador Thomas Greenfield has alluded to, so that we marshal a global response to what is a global crisis. With regards to humanitarian aid, USAID is on track to program more than $11 billion by the end of this fiscal year, $3.5 billion more than last year, which was itself a record amount. $5.7 billion of this funding will be directed to the World Food Program, and I know you'll be hearing from Executive Director Beasley today. But we know from decades of experience that hunger cannot be fought with food alone. In places where markets still function, we are distributing emergency cash assistance that can both feed people and boost local economies. We also know that in severe food crises, more people die from disease than hunger. So our assistance will also equip mobile health and nutrition teams to rapidly expand access to vaccines and to treat the severely ill. In drought conditions, clean water becomes incredibly scarce, and the threat of waterborne diseases like cholera grows. So we are also needing to invest in providing water and sanitation kits. We are also providing assistance to revive severely malnourished children, including $200 million, which I announced this week, to UNICEF, which will dramatically expand the production and distribution of so-called RUTF, ready-to-use therapeutic foods, shelf-stable products that can help 90% of severely malnourished children survive, where 90% typically perish without treatment. That announcement that I made a couple days ago was immediately matched by $50 million from private donors, and we have set a goal of marshaling another $250 million from global sources in the next several months. These are just a few of the immediate responses we will mobilize. But as we know, crisis requires more than just short-term answers. It requires sustained investments. As Putin attempts to dismantle one of the world's largest breadbaskets, it is imperative that we work to rebuild it. That is why yesterday I announced the launch of the Agri-Ukraine Initiative, $100 million that will provide seeds, fertilizer, financing, and equipment to Ukraine's farmers, will increase crop storage and export capacity in Ukraine, and spark the eventual reconstruction of the country's agricultural sector. Around the world, the $760 million that Congress has provided from the latest supplemental will allow us to give poor farmers greater access to drought-resistant seeds, apply precision fertilizer techniques that can both reduce waste and increase yields, and storage solutions that can prevent the 25 to 30% of food that is lost or wasted. Ultimately, though, the U.S. cannot solve this crisis alone, which is why the work of Ambassador Thomas Greenfield and Secretary Blinken is so vital. In 2016, the last time we saw a significant drought in the Horn of Africa, wealthy countries significantly stepped up to prevent the outbreak of a famine. Today, some of those same countries have spent just 8% of what they did then, despite a much more significant and devastating drought. The People's Republic of China, to date, has only supplied $3 million to the World Food Program. We have supplied $3.9 billion to the World Food Program. We need all countries to keep their food and agricultural markets open and avoid export bans on food and fertilizer. And we need relevant creditors to provide debt relief in restructuring to prevent broader economic and political collapse along the lines of that which Senator Risch spoke to. The United States Congress, reflecting the great decency of the American people, has helped mobilize an unprecedented response to an unprecedented crisis. But other governments, foundations, people in the private sector, and anyone else who can help must stand with us to meet this moment. With that, I look forward to taking your questions. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much.